Welcome back. The other day I was at the range and I watched several people shooting at silhouette-sized targets at a distance of 15 to 25 yards with their ARs. And they probably went through 15 or more magazines of 20 and 30 rounds. And I can tell you this, I was very, very much disenchanted about the marksmanship ability, if you could even come close to calling it marksmanship, of every one of the individuals that I watched. And unfortunately, this has become a statement that's all too often true. In 1959, there was a cigarette commercial that said, "Are you smoking more but enjoying it less?" You know, to paraphrase that, we can say, "Are you shooting more but hitting less?" There's a lot of misconception that goes along with our right to keep and bear arms. Our right to keep and bear arms carries with it an implied understanding that we should know how to shoot those arms that we keep. Having a right to keep and bear arms does not mean that we are free to shoot. Let me say that again. Having a right to keep and bear arms does not mean that we have freedom to shoot. I can't play the piano. I have a right to play the piano, but I'm not free to play the piano. If I went over to a piano keyboard and began doing what I thought was my best effort, it would be laughable. A person who has not disciplined himself to learn how to shoot a firearm or to be a marksman cannot say that he is free to shoot. He's free to pull the trigger and he's free to learn to shoot, but he's certainly not free to shoot. If he can't hit what he's aiming at or what he thinks he's aiming at, then that's not freedom at all. Freedom is, by its very nature, an ability. A person who gets a driver's license is free to drive a car, not only because he or she has acquired a driver's license, but because the state which issued it understands that the person now knows how to drive that car. You derive your freedom from your ability. Without an ability to do something, you're not free. When a soldier enters the armed forces, regardless of his previous physical ability and his shooting skill, he's not given the freedom to go into combat and wear the military insignia of the U.S. Armed Forces until he has qualified himself as being physically fit and being capable with the firearms which the government issues him. And we should take our own shooting ability no less lightly. Remember the movie, The Patriot, probably about 15 years ago or so? And the dad asked his boys, "And you know what I taught you?" "Sure, Dad." "Shoot small, miss small." That should become the abiding word, the abiding motto for any shooter. Shoot small and miss small. There's as an instructor, I have long thought about the reasons that our marksmanship has declined in this country. And to be very honest with you, some of it has to do with, and this sounds a little peculiar perhaps, but a lot of it has to do with, in fact, government intervention in some of the shooting sciences and the way things have been changed over the years. When I became a police firearms instructor, we were still at that time, and this is in the early 70s, we were still at that time very much engaged with the science of learning how to shoot precise, small targets, bullseye targets. We learned to shoot at 50 feet at a 50-foot pistol bullseye, and then after we were capable of firing competently and accurately at a 50-foot bullseye, an NRA bullseye, then we moved on to the combat sciences. We moved on to the combat skills, you know, how to engage silhouette targets, moving from one target to another, you know, engaging multiple targets. And we carried it further and further and deeper into combat shooting. But we had to start out with the basics. Without the basics, basically everything falls apart. If you were, you know, you'll never find a professional golfer, for instance, that just simply learned to be a professional golfer by going out and playing golf. The golf courses are full of people like that who just simply go out and play golf. The people who are free to play golf, the ones who can shoot par or better, are the ones who, at some time in their life, and more often the ones who do it consistently, employ a professional to teach them. First of all, to teach them the basics, to teach them, you know, in many ways, you know, our shooting is paralleled by other physical endeavors. As a marksman, I can say that, you know, position, body position, grip, stance, you know, your own physical composure, the way you breathe, everything, the way you, in golf, you say you address the ball. There's a reason for that. You know, you have to mentally accommodate what you're going to be doing for the next few seconds or a minute until you strike the ball. A shooter has to mentally prepare himself, and he has to also capably grip his gun, take the correct stance, assume the correct posture, and all these things have to go together, and then he has to put together that package with his sight picture package, and then only then can he capably fire a shot. There's been a certain amount of I would say government intervention that has occurred in the background. As I said, when I first began to teach, we were very much engaged with teaching people how to shoot bullseyes. And when they progressed from that point, they were extremely competent when it came to shooting silhouette targets. And whether you're shooting at a deer silhouette or a human silhouette for self-defense purposes, the basics still remain the same. You can't shortcut and change the basics. But as time went on, approaching the mid-'80s, we started to get into the politically correct situation, and the government began to promote the use of silhouette targets that were increasingly more blurry and didn't have defined small X rings and larger 10 rings and 9, 8, so forth. They said, well, it's only sufficient for you to hit the bullseye, hit the silhouette rather. Well, that seemed to be the precipitous downfall. From that point on, and they also began to say, well, it's not necessary to be shooting at 25 yards anymore. Let's you know, all shootings occur, police shootings occur by and large within 7 yards, and 75% of all shootings within 7 yards actually occur within 3 or 4 feet within arm's length. I understand that. I was a police officer for many years, and I instructed for many years, and I'm well aware of the statistics. But the police officer who cannot shoot capably and accurately at the longer ranges is not going to be any better at the shorter ranges. Being able to hit a target conversely at 25 yards, small targets at 25 yards, implies that he should have no difficulty hitting a target at 7 yards or even 3 feet. Those become baby steps at that point. But I have witnessed, because of this trend in the government, where I think government oversight in some of our smaller departments and some of the departments in this country, and I was in a larger department, but this oversight where we went from shooting very, very small targets to casting all that aside and just assuming that we only needed to learn how to shoot sufficiently, rather than with an objective reality. The objective reality is that we should learn how to be great marksmen, not sufficient marksmen. But when we went from being objectively excellent to being subjectively and passively proficient, things began to go downhill at a very, very fast decline. So by the time the late 80s came along and into the 90s, with the introduction of high-capacity magazines, now we added to this this built-in error of the lack of marksmanship. We added to that now high-capacity magazines, which somehow or another forgave us our sins. So rather than relying on being able to shoot effectively and proficiently with each and every shot, we simply relied then on having enough shots to carry us through whatever lack of marksmanship training we had. It's the most ridiculous concept I've ever heard of. Now there are those who will say, and they'll sneer and say, well, I'm not shooting bullseyes, I'm shooting at deer. I'm not, I'm a police officer, I'm a soldier, I'm not shooting at bullseye, I'm shooting at men. Well, Alvin York was a soldier, and he single-handedly overran a German position and took hundreds of Germans into his personal custody, and he was a bullseye shooter. He learned to shoot at very small targets as a kid, and he carried that training with him into the military, which was at the time teaching and fostering competence at a bullseye target with iron sights. I can say that I can do more with this gun with one shot than I can unfortunately attest I will see most shooters doing with 20 shots. Being able to shoot a lot does not mean you can shoot well. It only means that you have a gun that fires a lot. Being able to strike a target with that one single shot when it's called for, that's called marksmanship. Anything else is called something else. It's not marksmanship. My goal for this series is to teach each and every one of you what I know about marksmanship, so that you can become a better marksman, so that you'll have the freedom to shoot. Not the right to shoot, but the freedom to shoot. So that you'll have the freedom to be able to hit whatever you want, whenever you want to hit it. And I've said this in a couple of my other videos. There is a over-reliance these days on gadgetry. We're a nation that has, we've become very familiar with gadgetry, whether it's the computers, whether it's, no matter what it is, there's a simple mechanical fix for anything. All you have to do if you want to do something is, get onto Amazon.com or Midway USA, and they got something for you. They'll get something in the mail that will come to your door, and instead of learning how to shoot, you can stick a Harris bipod here, and that can make up for your lack of skill. But that's not making up for your lack of skill. What you're doing is you're turning this from being a shoulder arm into a platform-held weapon, and that's an entirely different matter. A person needs to learn how to shoot from the platform that God gave him. This is a shoulder-held firearm. It didn't come with a Harris bipod, and it didn't come with a telescopic sight. This peep sight right here, I can absolutely guarantee you and stand on this on the basis of what the military knows. The military knows that this peep sight, this receiver sight as it's called, in conjunction with the standard blade front sight, that's capable of striking targets the size of a human silhouette, which is basically only about a 12-inch area. To be able to hit that target capably and reliably out to 300 yards, and that should be able to accommodate every shooter. Every shooter who has a firearm should understand that he doesn't have to have a telescopic sight in order to hit distant targets. That has become an unfortunate fallacy. It was only, and I don't decry telescopic sights. I have telescopic sights on more than half of my rifles. But what I'm saying is that people have become over-reliant upon gadgetry, whether it be a telescopic sight to enhance their vision, or a Harris bipod to enhance their inability to hold a gun correctly. The telescopic sight does not improve your shooting capability. It only improves one thing. It improves your sighting capability, your optical clarity of the target. It brings it in closer. It magnifies. That's all that a scope does. It magnifies, and it permits you to have one flat plane with which to sight. So in other words, your crosshair is superimposed directly upon your target, rather than having three focal planes: your target, your front sight, and your receiver sight, or your rear blade. But I want to go through all those things independently and teach you how to shoot, and how to shoot effectively, and how to be a marksman. Once I go through these various disciplines, then you can practice them, and you'll be very surprised and pleased in your newfound ability. But again, just like any professional golfer knows, you have to learn the basics before you can go out and start playing professional golf. All right, so stay tuned, and we'll begin as soon as I can get unraveled here from this chair. God bless.